Hello. So I know that the shade from Dior, the Beige Mitzah, has become quite a popular shade, and I wanted to go through my collection and see what I had that was close to it. And maybe you have one of these shades, or maybe we can see why this shade is interesting. And if you're looking for this, you might be able to dupe it with something you have in your collection. So the first swatch that I have there is the Beige Mitzah. And what I would say is why this is such a beautiful shade and why I love it as well is that it is like a rosy taupe that has warmth to it. So it's kind of the best of both worlds of being both a cool and warm shadow. And I think that gives it such an interesting look. Now, if you've ever had a shadow that kind of crosses between both warm and cool, it sometimes has this interesting effect when you swatch it, where when you swatch, you have like two different tones of color just depending on how it came off on your finger. And I don't know if that's picking up on the camera, but some of these shades get that kind of effect, and it really is because it has like two different tones in it, which I think is why these are such beautiful one and done shades, because depending on how you put it on your lid and how you blend it out, it's going to look really interesting, right? So if you just apply this with your finger, it's going to have one way of looking. Then if you blend out the crease with a fluffy brush, it's going to look different there. Everywhere you kind of put a different effect to this, it's going to look unique. So that is that shade right there, the Beige Mitzah. That's the first one. Then the second one that I have is a little sample that I got from Sephora. This is from the Natasha Denona Glam palette. This is the shade 321M. It's an outer corner shade. And this is actually a pretty good dupe. It kind of lacks some of the taupeness, but it gives you some of that rosy tan that the Dior has. So I do think that if you have the Glam palette from Natasha Denona, this is getting you kind of close to it, and maybe if you add a little bit more taupiness to it, you'd get really close. Now the next shade, which I think really kind of matches the rosiness of the Dior, this is from Colourpop, and this is the That's Taupe palette, and this is the Snake Eyes shade, which I think is super beautiful. And this really has that sort of rosy tan. It's a little bit less of like the warm tone and a little bit more of a rosiness, but what you'll see here is that this one starts to do that weird kind of like shifting on your finger depending on how it's touching, that it has sort of two different tones in it, and it gives you a similar effect to the Dior. Okay, then underneath that, this is a shade from Nude Dip from Tom Ford, and it's that third one in the palette. And this really gives you that taupiness. The taupiness and some of the warmth. So I think this one doesn't have as much of the rosy, but it certainly has that taupe warmth that gets you pretty close to the Dior. Okay, and then the next one there, this was decidedly like the most brown, but for some reason it gives a similar overall effect for me. This is from the MAC palette that's called, let me grab it's one of the travel palettes, but it's called Travel Exclusive, and it's the Don't Tell, which I think is a luster shade. I don't quite remember what the L is, but it's this shade right here. And you can kind of see in the palette, like what you're looking for with these is something that's going to read almost like it's on the purpley side, but then it also has that warm brown in it. That's why it's so dimensional and interesting. So that is that shade right there. It's the one sort of that looks a little bit deeper. I think this one has a little bit more of like a depth of brown to it, but it really on the eye gives a similar look. And then the last shade we have here, which I would say is maybe the closest to the Dior. This is a shade from Viseart, and I actually took all my Visearts out of their palettes, but I have them in like one giant master palette. But this is from the Cashmere palette that they had, and it was one of their little like 6-pan sets. This shade I think really gets close to the idea of that. And I think when you think of cashmere like that, if you ever saw the Viseart palette in cashmere, it really does have that taupey, but also there's some warmth, but also there's some plum. It kind of gives you that feeling of the Dior. So, I would say if you are looking to kind of dupe the Dior Beige Mitzah, like what you really are looking for is something that'll give you a taupe rosy warmth, which seems like a big ask, but if you look around, you might have something close to that in your collection. Hopefully you can dupe it if you're not looking to purchase another shadow at the moment. I just want to show you kind of an overview of those shades, and you can kind of see where it is. It's going to be in one of those palettes that gives you both an earthy warmth and coolness. All right, thanks for watching.